Okay, get this. What if I told you that every single piece of music you love, it's all built on a mathematical lie? Seriously. Right at the very heart of all Western music, there's this unsolvable problem, kind of like a glitch in the code of harmony. And it's a problem that drove thinkers crazy for centuries, until they landed on this brilliant compromise that, believe it or not, you hear every single day. I know, it sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But it's a totally serious question. The real reason a piano can ever be perfectly in tune is because of this fundamental clash between, well, pure math and what sounds good to our ears. And figuring out the answer to this puzzle, that's what made all modern music even possible. All right, so to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to back up and ask an even more basic question. Like, why do certain notes sound good together? What makes a chord sound harmonious instead of just a clashing mess? Well, the answer isn't magic. It's actually physics. You see, it turns out that when you play a single note on, say, a guitar or a piano, you're not just hearing one single frequency. Nope. You're actually hearing a whole stack of other, quieter, higher notes on top of it. We call them overtones. And our brains are basically hardwired to love the sound of these overtones because they exist in these beautiful, simple whole number ratios. It's like nature's own blueprint for what sounds good. And this is where it gets really, really elegant. The two most powerful and fundamental building blocks in all of music, the octave and the perfect fifth, they aren't some mysterious artistic thing. They're literally just simple math. An octave? That's easy. You just double the frequency. A perfect fifth? You just multiply by 3/2. That's it. So simple. So, okay, armed with these super simple ratios, early musicians thought, great, let's build whole musical scales with these. And this led to two main ways of doing it. But as they were about to find out, each of these blueprints had a major and super frustrating flaw. So you basically have these two competing philosophies. On one side, you've got just tuning. This one is all about purity. The idea is to make sure every single note in the scale is a simple, clean ratio that relates back to your starting note. But then you've got Pythagorean tuning, which is way more ambitious. It tries to build the entire scale just by stacking that one perfect fifth ratio over and over and over again. But here's the big problem with just tuning. It sounds absolutely amazing, as long as you don't go anywhere. The second you want to change keys, or modulate, as musicians say, the whole thing just falls apart. See, the F sharp that sounds perfect in the key of A is a mathematically different note from the F sharp you need for the key of B. So you're essentially trapped in one key. It's beautiful, for sure, but totally inflexible. Which, of course, brings us back to the Pythagoreans. Now, you got to understand, for them, these simple ratios weren't just about making nice music. Oh, no. They believed this stuff was the divine blueprint for the entire cosmos. So naturally, they tried to build their whole musical universe from what they saw as the most perfect building block of all, that beautiful 3:2 ratio of the perfect fifth. And right here, this is where we get to the absolute heart of the problem. This is where our little mathematical detective story really starts to heat up, because in their attempt to build a totally perfect system, the Pythagoreans accidentally stumbled upon an imperfection that seems to be baked right into the universe itself. Okay, so the idea was actually pretty simple and elegant. Let's say you start on a note, like a C. You go up a perfect fifth, you land on a G. Then you go up a perfect fifth from G, you land on a D. And you just keep doing that. You do this 12 times, and in theory, you should travel through all the notes and land exactly back where you started, on a C, just 7 octaves higher. It's a beautiful idea, right? We call it the circle of fifths. And here it is, the villain of our story, right here on the screen. This little equation is the math behind that circle of fifths. On the left side, that's what you get when you stack 12 perfect fifths. On the right side, that's jumping up 7 perfect octaves. Now, these two numbers, they should be exactly the same. But they're not. They are so close, but they just don't line up. That tiny little gap, that mathematical rounding error, basically, it has a name, the Pythagorean coma. And what it meant was if you tuned all your fifths to be mathematically perfect, that very last one in the circle would be horribly, disgustingly out of tune. They even called it a wolf interval because it sounded so bad. It meant a truly perfect system was just mathematically impossible. So, for centuries, musicians and thinkers literally wrestled with this problem. I mean, if a perfect system is impossible, what are you going to do? Well, you do what we always do. You compromise. And the compromise they eventually came up with? It was nothing short of genius. The solution was completely revolutionary. Instead of making most of the intervals perfect and then trying to hide one really awful one, they decided to flip the script. They took that tiny bit of error, that Pythagorean comma, and they just smeared it out. They spread it evenly across all 12 notes in the scale. So what's the result? Well, no single interval is mathematically perfect anymore, but none of them are terrible either. Everything is just a tiny, tiny bit off. And this number right here really shows that compromise in action. A mathematically pure perfect fifth is a nice clean ratio of 1.5. But in our modern system, which we call equal temperament, that fifth is ever so slightly fudged to be about 1.4983. It's an irrational number, which is exactly the kind of messy number the Pythagoreans absolutely hated, and yet this tiny mathematical lie is what makes all the music we listen to today possible. And this chart? It shows you exactly what that compromise looks like in the real world. So if we start with the note A being tuned to 440 Hz, a C sharp in the old just tuning system would be exactly 550 Hz. In the Pythagorean system, you can see it's quite a bit sharper. So where does our modern equal-tempered C sharp land? Right in the middle. It perfectly splits the difference. It's a beautifully imperfect solution.
So, okay, you might be thinking, that's a clever math fix, but why does it really matter? Well, it matters a lot, because this compromise didn't just change how we tune instruments, it completely changed the entire course of musical history. It blew the doors wide open for what composers could even dream of writing.
You can really see how things evolved on this timeline. Back in the 1500s, music was pretty much stuck in safe keys, because everyone was terrified of hitting that awful wolf interval. Then, you fast forward to Bach's time around the 1700s, and they had figured out better ways to hide the comma. This allowed him to write his famous Well-Tempered Clavier, which explores all 24 keys. And then, by about 1900, equal temperament became the standard. The comma was perfectly smoothed out, making every key sound exactly the same, which is what unlocked the super complex music of the Romantics and the 20th century.
And here is a totally wild historical side effect of all this. Guitars, because of their straight frets, were basically forced to use a version of equal temperament way back in the 1500s. But pianos? Pianos didn't catch up until the late 1800s. Just think about that for a second. For almost 400 years, a piano and a guitar were fundamentally out of tune with each other. They used different operating systems. That's why you find almost no music written for them to play together during that whole time.
So really, the big takeaway here is this. All the music we know and love today, I'm talking everything from Bach to the Beatles to Beyoncé, it's only possible because we finally solved this ancient math problem. Every single song you listen to is the result of this beautiful, practical, and really elegant decision to trade mathematical perfection for creative flexibility. But all this does leave us with one final kind of thought-provoking question. See, before we had equal temperament, different keys actually had genuinely different moods and characters because their internal ratios were all slightly different. So in making every key sound exactly the same, in gaining all this amazing flexibility, did we maybe lose a little bit of that unique color along the way? It's just something to think about the next time you put on your favorite song.